Welcome to episode 15, where we're going to be talking about fine-tuning. Now, fine-tuning is the process of taking a large pre-trained model that was trained on a large generic data set and training a very small piece of that model on a smaller amount of data to do a very specific task. And interestingly, a lot of the applications that we've talked about in previous episodes, applications you interact with on a daily basis, are based on fine-tuned models, not on the pre-trained models themselves. So how does this work? Let's take a look. This is a pre-trained model. It is trained on a large non-specific data set. In an image classification model like this could be images of dogs and zebras and pots and pans and clothes and whatever you could imagine, just being a bunch of generic data. We train the model, and then it gives us generic outputs. For example, it tells us that this image is of a dog. It doesn't tell us that this image is of a golden retriever because there wasn't a lot of golden retrievers in this large non-specific data set, so it lumps golden retrievers and chihuahuas all together. Now, what's really interesting about these large pre-trained models that we've found is that early in the model learns very fundamental components of what makes an object, things like curves and lines. And then later in the model, so in later layers of our model, we actually see more complex things emerge. And so there we have detectors for dog ears or dog noses. And so they're much more specific. And so early in the model, we're just trying to figure out where are the curves in the model. So we see here early curves and lines lead to more complex shapes later in the model. Here's a great example where we have a window detector, a car body detector, and a wheel detector kind of in the middle of our model. And then those combine together to be a car detector. And so early neurons in our model will detect windows or car bodies and wheels, and they'll combine together to be a car detector. Pretty cool. But we can leverage this in order to do fine-tuning. So if we know that a lot of those fundamental components like curves and lines that are common across all objects, those are learned early in the model, then we can keep all of that training the same, and we can just fine-tune a small portion of that model. So we can just fine-tune that end that is really focused on our end application. So we can take a smaller task-specific data set, fine-tune a smaller portion of the model, and then we get our specific task outputs. For example, in medical imaging, as shown here. Now, remember that parameters are set to random numbers at the start of training. The nice thing about using a pre-trained model is that your parameters are not set to be random numbers. They've already been trained. And we can leverage this if we wanted to start with our pre-trained model parameters and retrain our entire model. So this is another option for you when doing fine-tuning. You can retrain your whole model, but just start with pre-trained model parameters instead of those randomly initialized model parameters. And because these weights are already closer to what you need, it will take a lot less time to train. All right, that is fine-tuning. And next up, we're going to talk about prompting. Thank you for joining me for this episode in the AI for People Who Hate Math series. This is an unscripted series that is inspired by my conversations with people who feel like they can't conceptually understand AI because it's just too much math. And it usually is. Most AI classes, tutorials, and videos are full of math. The AI classes that I teach as a professor have math on nearly every slide. I wanted to challenge this assumption that AI could only be conceptualized by people with strong math backgrounds. Especially as AI permeates our daily lives, I think it's important that everyone understands the technology, at least conceptually. Because without it, we're putting a lot of trust into systems we don't understand. Feel free to let me know in the comments if there are topics that you want to see covered. The initial launch is 20 episodes, and I am excited to see what you think.